we coddle our kids. Everyone gets a participation trophy. God forbid the kid fails and they have to learn what that feeling of rejection is. I'm a big believer in allowing your kid to fail, letting them feel the feelings, go through the process and pain, and then let them figure out how to move on and move on to the next thing, as opposed to trying to curate the stale environment of success around them.
Jennifer, where does this podcast find you?
I'm in LA.
Let's jump right into it. In your popular TEDx talk, The Secret to Getting Anything You Want in Life, you provide some practical steps for being successful in life. These steps are: be bold, ask for what you want, just act, get comfortable at failing, practice training your brain to be bold, and write down anything you want in life and make 10 attempts with it. Can you take us through how you identified these specific steps for success?
Absolutely, I can. So, boldness is the secret sauce to success. It's not intelligence. I think people focus way too much on smarts and not just acting. And so, my entire life and I base my philosophy on that is people are not doing the most simple thing possible, which is actually just asking for what they want. And therefore they acquiesce or they accept the good enough. And then that's what we have. So, what my first step is, if figure out what you want, even right now, it doesn't have to be for your lifelong thing, but just for right now, figure out what that is that you want, and then make 10 attempts at going for it. Because my other part is I created this whole idea of this 10% target. And, we hear a lot about 10xing your life and doing all these things, but then there's no real practical, actionable step to get to that place. So my thing is like, you know what? Most people don't even make one attempt. Almost nobody makes two attempts. So if you're somebody who is retraining your brain to make 10 attempts, your chances on just pure volume alone have been exponentially been greater, right? So you're making 10 attempts at whatever that thing is you want most. And you may not even get to that particular goal, but another opportunity will present itself based on going through the process. And that's more or less what I speak about and how people can retrain their brains technically to be more bold and kind of design and curate the life that they really want in everything, by the way, Scott, not just business. It could be personal. It could be in any area that you feel that you're just not showing up.
Oh, I think of it as, and I think it's a similar end state. I've said that key to success is the willingness to endure rejection. I mean, isn't part of being bold the ratio of your resilience over failure? Isn't it the willingness to be bold again? Is that somewhat what you mean by kind of your 10% rule?
Absolutely, exactly. So basically, it's about training your brain to be resilient. And how you do that is you become desensitized to the feeling of failure. Because all of this is about, it's all about just failing over and over again to become successful, right? Like the people who are the most successful is because they've fallen probably more than anybody else.
How do you instill that sense of being bold in children? How do you teach resilience, and how do you teach your kids to be bold?
A lot of parents, I find, especially where I live, there's a lot of helicoptering parents. I mean, this has kind of become like the new thing. I call it like the coddle culture of today, right? We coddle our kids, where then they're not given those skills later on. So, everyone gets a participation trophy. So if you fail, God forbid the kid fails and they have to learn what that feeling of rejection is. I'm a big believer in allowing your kid to fail, letting them feel the feelings, go through the process and pain, and then let them figure out how to move on and move on to the next thing, as opposed to trying to curate the stale environment of success around them. I feel like when I was younger, it was kind of much more part of the process, and that's why I feel like now the coddling, the coddle culture has really kind of been a disservice for kids.
As I think about this, it feels like call the boldness or willingness to endure rejection. I feel as if, okay, you're a kid, you're naturally shy. You're not born bold. Maybe you are, but I don't think you are. I think you're born shy, and then a lot of people develop confidence. They get capitalist motivations to be aggressive, ask for the business, ask for the job, go up to a strange potential romantic partner. They're taught it. And then, at least what's happened to me, as I've become more successful and have developed some economic security, frankly, I've become lazy around being bold because I expect things to come to me. I don't I don't want to be bold any longer. Is there an arc to boldness as you age?
That's so true. I totally agree. So I think that I think being bold is a skill. I don't think that most of us are born bold, to your point. That's not how I see it either. I think you have to you got to practice the skill of boldness at a young age. And like anything else, if you want to get good at karate, Spanish, dance, tennis, whatever it is, you need to put in the hours and times in the practice. Just like if you want to be bold. That's the first part. And you practice being bold or brave by doing these small little bold moves. Or I say, be brave for 10 seconds. If you can be brave for 10 seconds and just go through it, that's all you need to do. But I do believe that as we do get older, we definitely get less bold because, especially if we're successful, right? Because we don't have that same tenacity or hustle because we don't have to. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like if you don't use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you work out and you stop working out, your muscles will atrophy. It's the same thing, right? Anything that you don't use, you will atrophy and it won't be as good.
It feels as if almost every or a lot of very successful companies, whether it's Netflix or Facebook or Tinder, they're kind of suppressing our mojo to be bold, aren't they? I mean, why be bold and shower and spend money on going to an activity where you might meet somebody? Why try and network at an event when there's LinkedIn, believing that there's just these lower risk, easier facsimiles of life or of being bold that kind of protect you from taking real risks? Aren't we sort of aren't young people being trained not to be bold?
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote this book called Bigger, Better, Bolder, and I have a huge part of like a huge section about this whole thing that we have now become we're losing the ability to socialize. We're losing even the ability to even have that aggressive or that tenacity and go getter mentality because things have become too easy with technology, right? Like if with you're saying like with all the different like dating apps, you can name any of them. We can just passively, go left. And if we like someone, we could just rely on us just texting. If they don't like us, who cares? We're always hiding behind a screen as opposed to having that ability to have that physical interaction. All of these things have taken over our ability to kind of evolve and become self-actualize in a way that we actually are able to design exactly what we want.
What do you I get asked all the time, what advice would I give to men to be more professionally and romantically successful? What attributes, what coaching would you impart on young men? And so I put the question to you, what advice do you give to young women around how to be professionally and romantically successful in today's environments, given some of the challenges we've outlined?
I think first of all, you got to you got to build self confidence, and you can start at the like fundamentals of building in habits that you follow through on. I think a lot of times we're losing a lot of our self confidence because we make promises to ourselves and we're not following through on those, and that just deepens our low self esteem. Right. So if we can create habits that are building our self worth by small things like even working out regularly. Like I'm a big believer, and if you're building physical confidence, you end up building mental confidence, mental strength. They go hand in hand. And that will help grow and build their mental confidence, which then they show up in the world differently. They present themselves better. And you do things like that regularly. It helps you as you get older and you can be more bold, right? When you're more confident, you're not afraid to ask or talk or do all those things. But it really starts at like a core fundamental level. It simply is just like exercising. taking care of yourself physically.
Agreed. What do you just define as the end state? What is in your mind? What does success look like professionally and personally?
I think it's having a rich life, and I don't mean that by the fi I don't mean money, rich life. I think having fulfilling relationships, I think satiating relationships, experiences. I think success to me isn't about having a great career and then having all these other areas in your life be obsolete. To me, that to me is not success. I think you have to be able to, really, I think, foster relationships. I think if you don't have that, you really have nothing. And that's why, again, I keep on going back to all this. If we don't figure out a way to curate these, then really it's a very shallow and empty existence.
So I like these hacks. It just makes sense to me. You set goals around working out and fitness. You hit those goals, you develop confidence, feel better about yourself, trying to keep your word, trying to be disciplined about following through. Have you thought about any other kind of little hacks to start, if you will, building that reservoir of confidence?
I think leaning in on your strengths is a really big one. I think a lot of times that we hear, and funnily enough, you talk about this a lot. I think we did this on my podcast about people constantly following what their quote unquote passion is, right? Versus like leaning into their actual where their effort is lying or what they're good at. To me, it's like the two don't have to go hand in hand. Like I'm a big believer. Like what I've done my whole life is I figured out early on. I was fortunate enough to be somewhat self-aware and figured out that, what I'm really good at and what I'm not so great at. And then I went really in on the things that I was good at and really kind of like exponentially became even better at my strengths, which then built my confidence. And then that in itself kind of just, took on a life of its own, where I was able then to do a lot of other things that I would have otherwise never been able to if I only focused on the things that if I focused too much on what I was weak on, that would have just like minimized my confidence, right? Minimized my success ability and just gave me a lot of overwhelmingness and frustration. But a lot of us don't do anything because we are full of so much self doubt. So much, insecurity around we're not pretty enough, we're not talented enough, we're not this enough, and then like don't do anything. And then that just is like that becomes a vicious spiral down to just living, not enjoying, not being successful, not really curating or designing what you want. So like I say all the time, like chase what you want. Don't just take what you get. But then you have to put in the work and be proactive in your life and make these decisions and learn discipline. Not rely on motivation, but learn discipline.
I read that you're one of the 100 most influential people in health and fitness. What do you have any? What role, if any, does spirituality, meditation, gratitude practice play in your life, and what role does that play in quote unquote building this reservoir of confidence?
I'm not a big meditator. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not good at it. Are you good at it?
It's near impossible to me, and I have almost no interest in it, and I'm embarrassed because it's like saying you don't believe in climate change, or I don't know. I feel shamed by the world when I acknowledge I don't meditate every day.
I totally agree. I'm not a big believer in just like following, just being basically being a sheep. And that's basically, I feel what's happened, right? Like now I feel shamed myself because even when you ask me that question about like meditation or breath work, my heart sank because I'm like, I don't do either, but I've figured out what works for me. And like the truth of the matter is, to answer your question, what I do is what works for me. And just because it works for me doesn't mean it works for you, Scott, or Bob, or Joe, or whoever. And I think what happens is we tend to listen to what other people do. They like to do the meditation and they like to do the breath work. And then we inhabit what they do, even though we don't really like it. It doesn't really fill us. And then that becomes our routine very superficially. What I suggest to people is figure out what works for you and what you like by doing, trial and error. I tried meditation a bazillion times. And quite honestly, it doesn't work for me in that way. What works for me, my form of meditation is jogging. I get my best ideas. I go into a quote unquote flow state when I jog. That is a habit that I do daily My suggestion is to people, figure out a routine and a system that makes you the best version of yourself by trying a lot of shit. And then whatever that is, do that every day or as often as you can.
Yeah, I used to, do a cold plunge while I was doing breath work and then write down the things I was grateful for, and I decided to give that up and just drink a shit ton of alcohol on a regular basis. But anyways, what
Did it
going to
work?
it's working for me. I'm happy. I'm grateful I get to do these things. What
I
about
love it.
specifically health and fitness? I mean, you're obviously really into fitness, and I think it's something that's been kind of my antidepressant my entire life. But there's just a huge swath of people out there who are never going to work out every day. They're never going to really. They just don't. It's just not their thing. Have you thought about kind of it's like, what's the old Navy of health and fitness? When I say old Navy, 80% of the gap for 50% of the price. Have you thought about just sort of basic low effort, fairly high ROI things people should incorporate into their life, assuming that they're just never going to be that guy or that gal who's super into fitness?
I say walking. Walking is the most basic thing you can do. Anybody can do it. I mean, you don't need equipment, you don't need a gym membership, and it is I would say the number one health hack. You like the word hack? The number one health hack out there, the most bang for your buck. And it's great not only for your physical, but for your mental astuteness, for your mental longevity overall. If we can get people just to walk 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, the benefits are enormous. And that's like, again, like that's not asking people. I mean, if you can't find 20 minutes a day to move your body, then we have a bigger problem. And the reason why I think like there's nothing that you're going to say to me that will take me away from the idea of movement. I think a body in motion stays in motion. I think inertia is a huge, huge thing, and we don't focus on that enough. When you're stagnant, everything stays stagnant. Just you talk about an antidepressant, a mood stabilizer. To me, it's been like a exercise has been a saving grace for me in terms of that, and I think if people stayed with it long enough to kind of get to see the benefits, they would never look back. As you get older, though, another one, as you know, and I'm sure you do, strength training. I mean, yes, people don't like to work out. I get it. But forget about physicality. How about just in terms of like overall preventative health, in terms of building lean muscle mass and strength training for your bones, for your joints. I mean, we're so obsessed in this culture with longevity and anti-aging, and yet we're like basically missing some major fundamentals. We're going to all of these drugs and supplements and peptides, and I can go on and on and on, hormone replacement, but yet we're not doing the things that are at the core, the most basic things we need to do, which is lift heavy things and move your body by walking. These are not just hacks for your overall health. These are hacks for success. There's not a like that's very rarely do I meet somebody who's really kind of accomplished a lot in their life. I'm gonna ask you, who don't integrate some form of that movement into their life.
Well, yeah, 484 of the Fortune 500 CEOs work out 5 plus times a week. It's the common attribute more so than college degrees, gender, race. The most common thing among Fortune 500 CEOs is regular exercise. So I'll put forward another hack, and it's something I wish I discovered earlier, and it's so basic, and it also overlaps nicely with kindness. But the reality is, I just didn't embrace it until I was older. I feel much more confident when I compliment others. And that is, if I find the confidence that I met someone last night and this guy, and he was wearing this great outfit and he's so handsome. I'm like, Jesus, I said to him, like in the middle of dinner, I'm like, Jesus Christ, you're so good looking and have such a great sense of style. And it just like stopped the table. And then everyone kept talking. And I just could tell this guy, he was a little bit embarrassed, but I think he was like probably late 20s. I could see this guy like literally like grow a foot. and I'm doing a lot of virtue signaling right now, but I don't do it. I'd like to think I do it for him, but what I found is it makes me feel more confident. And I wish I'd figured this out earlier that by recognizing other people's strengths and attributes, you're kind of saying to the world, I'm a baller. I'm confident enough to say these things because I'm not threatened by other people's attributes because I have so many positives myself. What are your thoughts on complimenting as a means of building your own reservoir of confidence?
Oh my god, I totally love that, and I'm a big believer. I do that all the time, by the way, and people look at me strange because I'll be in the elevator and I'll say the most, like, random compliment to somebody.
Women are much better at it than men. Women are much better at it than men.
You're so right, but even women are kind of like I find it also disarms people, makes them much more comfortable, and you become more likable, so that's another kind of hack, but I will say, you were asking me earlier to that similar to what you're talking about with confidence and giving people a compliment. There's been a ton of research on even the gratitude journaling. People are constantly talking about journaling, gratitude journals, but the research has actually shown that a better way to really feel gratitude is to say to somebody, thank you so much for this. One person, right? And their response in terms to back to you like, "Oh, you're welcome." That, like, hit of dopamine of terms of, like, them acknowledging that you're giving them that kind of acknowledgement is much stronger than just writing in a notebook every morning the 5 things that you're grateful for, I should say. And which, by the way, means that nothing will ever take the place of human connection and human interaction.
Have you given any thought to the other side of the spectrum here? And that is, okay, be bold, some hacks around health and lifestyle to be happier. What about when you're when you're down and you're trying to kind of get unstuck? And by the way, to mourn and be depressed is natural and there's nothing wrong with that. But have you given any thought or do you have any sort of personal methodologies or go-tos in terms when you say, I'm not doing well and I want to get out of this and I want to get out of it faster?
Well, number 1, are you talking more about, like, in that moment? Because if it's in that moment of feeling unwell, uh, go for a walk in your like, just get up,
Yeah,
change
get
your
in nature.
environment,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
get into nature. Go for a walk, go for a hike. You know what? How about just calling a friend? I mean, I like to say, a lot of times we focus on how we feel before an act, right? But if we try and focus on that feeling of how we feel after we do something, it really does help and shapeshift how we go about our days.
Makes sense. And last question, Jennifer. We're actually very in very similar businesses, authors, podcasting, speaking. That's where I get not the lion's share of my revenue, but a lot of it. And you're doing the same thing. How did you get into this business? I think a lot of people would look at the business we're in and think, that seems like a cool way to make a living. And they're not entirely sure how to start. How did you get into this business?
A lot of things listen, a lot of the things that I've started doing was I didn't know anything about it, but I didn't have a destination, but I picked a direction. I mean, my career has pivoted over the years. All right. I was in the sports world and then I'm like, no, I went back to business school and then I got into the music world and then I didn't want to do that anymore. I went into the health and I literally was following like where my effort was going, which was I was very interested in health. So I kind of had that path in that direction. And with the podcasting and all those things, I feel like it was literally transferable skills. I took skills from all the things I've done before and accumulated them and created what I have now. It's ever evolving. So focus on a goal that's attainable. And I guess at the end of the day, my goal is to help people. I'm not an expert or a guru or any of these things. Like I hate when people call themselves that. I'm just somebody, you know what I mean, who is giving somebody ideas to be a little bit better, to up level their lives based on like what I've tried through my trial and error. And that to me is being bold and just going for it and not overthinking it and not using analysis paralysis to talk yourself in or out of something. If I can teach people a way to just act.
Jennifer Cohen is an entrepreneur, brand strategist, educator, and host of the business podcast Habits and Hustle. She is also a best-selling author of several books in the fitness and wellness space, including her latest, Bigger, Better, Bolder, Live the Life You Want, Not the Life You Get. Jennifer has also been named one of the top 100 most influential people in health and fitness. She joins us from her home in Los Angeles. Jennifer, I love being on your podcast, and you're one of the few people whose podcast I've gone on, and I immediately called our producer, Caroline, and said, we have to get Jennifer on the pod. So thanks for joining us.
I love talking to you. Thank you. And you are a great guest, and I want you back on. People are asking me all the time when you're
Go
coming back
on. There's that compliment.